Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Jobin, and you are listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. This podcast is dedicated to helping family caregivers in Ontario. Through expert tips and resources, you will gain knowledge and validation for the ups and downs that come with caregiving. More importantly, you'll learn that you're not alone. It's so important to take this time for yourself. We're glad you're here. Today, we are joined by Donna Fitzgerald. Donna is a facilitator of authentic leadership conversations, co-author of Daring to Share, There to Hear, and Creative Healing Through Transformation, Conversations with My Soul. Donna has lived experience as a caregiver to her husband as he battled ALS. Donna's husband passed away on November 13th, 2004. Donna, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. I'm glad to be here and hope that what I share today will support and help caregivers on their journey.
I hope so too. And we wanted really to create the space on Time to Talk where Ontario caregivers can connect and share. And like you said, hopefully through our conversation today, we're going to gain a little bit more insight into your caregiving journey. And I know that you've been so generous in terms of sharing what you've learned with others through your books and through webinars. And we want to learn more about your book as well. So let's get to it without further ado. Let's go back to the beginning. When did you become a caregiver?
Oh, I became a caregiver back in September 1998. My husband was diagnosed with ALS. He was experiencing some kind of limb onset, like weakness in his hands and legs and some fasciculating across his chest. We were building our dream home at that time. So we were kind of chalking it up to he was working full time, plus we were working on the house. And then we had moved into our new home in August and went to the neurologist in September, and he was diagnosed with ALS. And he was 43 at the time, and our children were 5 and 12. And so our journey was 6 years. And the first year I called our honeymoon year because he was still actively working around the house and had given up work. So he was puttering around the house and we were still living a fairly normal life. The second year was, I kind of say that ALS had moved in and was showing us who was running the show. And so then that was the year that we kind of realized this was going to be our reality. I found the first year we were more like, we were going to do whatever we could for research. We were going to do whatever we could to fundraise because we had that hope and we had the energy. So that was really the beginning. And then he passed away of respiratory failure in November 2004 at our local rehab hospital because I had caregiver burnout at 4.5 years. And he had to spend the last 18 months there, but I still brought him home on Friday nights till Sunday night. So we still had family time.
And as you mentioned, all throughout this time, you have 2 young children as well. So, and we're going to get a little bit more into sort of the whole idea of caregiver burnout, but certainly very understandable because you're raising 2 young children at the same time that you're caregiving for your husband.
Right. And working full time.
So that was certainly a lot on your plate. And again, I think it's so generous of you to share your story for others. And I know that you've been an incredible support to other people along the way. And we hope we can even reach a wider audience at this time. What kind of supports, if any, did you receive or turn to when you were in these early stages of caregiving for your husband?
Oh, when I think back to the early stages, there wasn't really any support. We went to the neurologist, got our pamphlet that said he had ALS, go home and get your affairs in order kind of thing, is what we were told. And I think from that moment on, we just kind of focused on what we could do, gathering in information and really understanding it. I mean, we were naive. Neither one of us knew what ALS was. I had never experienced anyone with a terminal illness. I'd never lost anyone in my life. This was all new. I did seek out social worker at my place of employment. I was an administrative assistant at the local hospital. So I kind of sat with her a couple of times in the early stages because I had no idea what was ahead of me. And my family doctor, I guess, would have been the two supports, and family and friends. Just trying to kind of wrap my head around what was ahead, but being naive to what a caregiver was going to be like. I made lots of promises to my husband that I wasn't able to keep. And in hindsight now, if I had had more support in the beginning, those supports could have probably helped me express and reword some of my promises, like you're going to die at home, I'll keep you at home. In actual fact, it would probably have been better to have said, I'll keep you home as long as it's safe for all of us. So then, kind of dealing with the guilt of, making promises and then having to, along the way, break them.
So does that basically inform your writing and any of the speaking engagements and the videos that you have on your website? Is the work that you've done in and around caregiving seeking to fill the gaps that you found there when you first became a caregiver? Are you hoping to empower and inform people that are just starting out on this journey with information that you didn't have?
Oh, definitely. When my husband was diagnosed, we had an ALS chapter here in my hometown, but it was a fundraising support. There was no support group. And then on top of that, I had 2 children, and everyone else in the group were older and their children were adults. So my reality was totally different from their reality. So I remember, I think we were about 2 years in, and I was sitting at one of these fundraising meetings, and I just made a commitment to myself that day that when I could, I would do whatever I could to support caregivers, because I was feeling so isolated and alone, and just kind of trudging along just the best I could and trying to figure it out day by day as I, came into an issue. Then, because I was having to be an advocate for my husband, I was having to be an advocate for my children and try to support them through their emotional, every day. And so it was a difficult time for sure.
There is no blueprint, I think, for this, but it certainly helps if there's more information out there or more people that are out there sharing their stories, for sure. So again, we're extra glad that you're here today sharing yours with us. What do you think is the biggest challenge for caregivers, or specifically spouses, caring for their significant other? And I think you touched on this a little bit already with some of the things you said, but
I think the biggest challenge was that I wasn't prepared emotionally or physically for what being a caregiver entailed. You go into it, and it's so incremental that it just starts little bit by, because your caregiving role has an evolution within itself. But within that evolution, there was I was working full time. I was taking on roles around the house that I never did before. I was becoming the breadwinner, the financial person, the nurse, the therapist, all these roles that were coming to me within our daily lives. Oh, nurse, schedule maker for all the appointments. And so I think the main thing I wasn't prepared for was the intensity of all these added roles, but they're added on so gradually that you don't really realize until you're really in it and you're losing yourself a little bit at a time because I didn't have time to do the things I had done previously that helped me be grounded in the foundational practices that I had prior to becoming a caregiver.
Let's talk about your book, Creative Healing Through Transformation, Conversations with My Soul. So we're talking about sort of what led you to writing it now. You say it's a book about self-care and self-discovery. So where did the idea of writing the book come from, and how did this journey sort of begin in terms of writing it?
Well, it started in the pandemic. All of us were stuck at home, and for the first 6 months of the pandemic, I live alone, and I wasn't able to see my grandkids, and I wouldn't, or my kids, and I used to go. I was very active in swimming and running and cycling and all that kind of thing, and that kind of just stopped. So I was in the house, and I've been a journaler now for 20 years. So in the first 6 months, as I always do, I go back to my writing and just kind of writing out the emotions and feelings and how I was feeling. And I had a friend who was working on her own book using these authentic leadership global conversations, which I am part of. And they are to live more authentically and use these worksheets to understand your values and just how we show up in the world. But they were for more like business. And my friend Diana was creating this through COVID to help support people to kind of be able to write down their own emotions. And this became Daring to Share. And that was her publication. And I was out for a 40-kilometer ride one day, and I thought, wow, maybe I could adapt those worksheets, because I've done them on and off for the last 15 years when I hit a place in life where I need to just reevaluate things. Maybe I could adapt them in my words and actually interject some of the feelings and emotions and what I was experiencing through caregiving within these chapters. And then I added a few more chapters, one on journaling, one on, I call them emotional feeling boards, but they're kind of like a vision board. It just gives you a visual of how you're expressing or seeing your emotions on paper. So that's really how it began. In the beginning of the pandemic, I was just sitting here and thinking, oh my gosh, I know what it was like as a caregiver 20 years ago. And then you have a pandemic on top of it, and support groups were not working face to face. They went to Zoom. It was hard to get into physicians, and so home care, just everything was changed, and I was saddened, and I was really hurting in my heart that caregivers were going to have to go through this. And my fear was that the possibility of so much caregiver burnout after this, because there just was no release or retreat from the day-to-day to really to regather your own energy. So that was the initial reason for writing it. And it was more like over the years, I've wanted to write a book about my experience. And I've tried on and off over the years, but it just became a kind of a description of events. And then when I came up with this, I thought, well, that's great, because then I can go back into my free flow writing. And so I pulled out some of my own free flow writing and put at the end of each chapter. So it kind of gives a feeling of the evolution of my own healing and rebuilding my life. So I'm hoping that will inspire others that there is a healing process and you can move forward. So really, it all goes back to that 2 years into caregiving, and I made that commitment to myself to just do whatever I can to help support caregivers. There's no relief for caregiver burnout.
Managing Care is an online resource that provides information, advice, and support for caregivers in Ontario. It can help you connect with other caregivers and find resources to help you manage care, such as respite services, financial support, and other helpful services. Managing Care can provide caregivers with invaluable support and guidance to help make your caregiving journey a little easier. With Managing Care, you can be sure to get the help and support you need to provide the best care for your care recipient. Visit ontariocaregiver.ca to learn more. So why do you think that self-care and self-discovery are so important for caregivers?
It's so important because if you're not aware of your own emotions and feelings, and you're pushing them down and pushing them down, at some point you're going to hit that wall where you're experiencing caregiver burnout. And that's what happened to me. It's a terrifying place to be when you realize you don't know who you are. You know all the roles you have in life. I knew what I was expected to do and my responsibilities, but I always like that. I describe it kind of like an M&M. I was a shell, but the inside was gone. And that was a very terrifying place to be because I hadn't put myself on the list. I didn't realize that self-care isn't selfish. It's looking after yourself. So you have the energy, you have the capability to make those hard decisions for yourself, for your family, for your children. And so I think that was the biggest lesson for me, was that it was important to take time for myself. And it's not like it had to be a lot of time. It was just like the journaling allowed me, in the beginning, it was 10 minutes a day, just to sit down and just to empty my brain of, I was going through grief. And I needed to acknowledge that grief. It was like anticipatory grief. Every time my husband went into a bad episode, you were wondering, okay, is this the next stage? Or I was going through the grief of our relationship, husband and wife, and then you're becoming more of a caregiver. So then there's that disconnect. I was grieving the life that I thought we would have. I was grieving all these little changes, and then also watching my children, like our daughter, who was 5. I mean, she had worry in her tummy from the time she was 5. So she's been in counseling since she was 5, and she had to watch the stages of her dad. And my son was 12, but his reality is different because he had 12 years with a healthy dad, and he was old enough to go outside the house and be kind of more normal, where our 5-year-old kind of lived in it with me. Right. So it's so important to stay connected to who you are and your own emotions, because nobody can help you with your own emotions, only you.
Yeah.
And through the journaling, I was becoming more self-aware of my emotions and feelings. And by releasing them, it kind of cleared out my brain so that I had more clarity with the everyday decisions that I had to make for the family. So that was the real awakening at the time of caregiver burnout. I sat at a lake with a box of books, thinking I could find myself in a box of self-help books, and then realizing I needed to find out for myself, and it was going to take a lot of work. And then that was added on to what I was already doing. So, but I understood that if I didn't do that, how could I continue to do the caregiving until I knew my husband was going to die? Nobody lives through ALS. But then I had to work through my grief journey and become a single parent. So it became very apparent to me that I had to take this seriously to reconnect with who I was, because I had a future and children and myself that needed to move forward.
You brought up a lot of really important points here, I think, about related to journaling, because and I think you answered some of this about how caregivers can use journaling to deal with caregiving responsibilities and stress, but you really sort of narrowed it down into also self-discovery. And I get that if you're experiencing caregiver burnout already, journaling is a recommended thing that we do, but then it feels like, okay, here's another thing that you need to do. But I think that you brought up such an important point in that it's not, you're using it to sort of pinpoint sort of the self, that you're using it to reconnect with yourself, instead of sort of, okay, I'm going to read all these books that are about self-help and what other people are telling you. You're using that journaling as a vehicle.
Are you feeling overwhelmed and
through
exhausted as a
self-discovery? Am I
caregiver?
right?
You don't
That's
have
correct.
to be through
It gives yourself a voice.
With peer support from Ontario Caregiver Organization,
you're the voice
you can
for
connect
your
with people
family,
who
you're the voice
understand
for
what you are going
advocating
through.
the
Together,
medical,
you can share
your children's
experiences, provide
lives,
advice,
whatever.
and
You have a
gain the
voice
strength you
outside of
need to keep
everything,
going.
and you lose the
Get
voice
the support
within
you need
yourself.
today at ontariocaregiver.ca.
And you need to have those conversations with yourself, which in the book I call conversations with my soul. Those journaling conversations are it's me talking to my soul and reconnecting with my soul. And they're my conversations. Nobody else needs to hear them, see them, whatever. It just became my sacred time with myself, where I felt like I was able to use my voice, even if it was to myself. And it has become, it's 20 years and I'm still journaling every day. And it's kind of morphed into journaling and creative writing. But in the beginning, it felt daunting. It felt like, oh my gosh, if I start journaling about how I'm feeling, the floodgates are going to open. I'm not going to be able to, but that wasn't really my reality. I sat down and I started to just whatever was in my mind, I just write it down. And then the realization that journaling doesn't have to make sense. It's not like you're writing a story, you're just getting rid of those thoughts. And then in time, you're able to release the thoughts, and then you get a little more comfortable, and then it kind of flows. And then I always found it interesting after I would write and reread it, sometimes when I was struggling with something, the answer was on the page, because I had kind of gotten it out of my head and I could see it. And then I understood what things I could do. Like, for instance, I was struggling for a while with trying to maintain healthy meals for a family, because I was working. And then when I came home at 4:30, I was on duty. My husband was total care for from 2 years to 6. So then I realized through my journaling that, okay, I'll just go get groceries on Saturday morning. And I just cooked all day Saturday, made a mess of the kitchen, but I had meals for the week. So through my journaling, I kind of had clarity, and it kind of helped me navigate what I was facing at the time. And then I would, if I didn't have time in the morning, I would, if I was at work and I walked down to the park, I'd have a little book in my purse and I kind of journal in the park. So it was kind of something that I could take with me, and I could grab 10 minutes or in the car, or that's really how it started. And then I don't save my journals. I burn them or shred them, because for me, it's a release. It's kind of a, I've released it, so then I release it to the universe, kind of thing. So I don't go.
You said this, because
I don't back.
I do the same thing. I send them to the shredder. It's so interesting. And there's a point where I felt guilty about it. Like, oh, I should keep this for, I don't know, posterity or something. And I'm like, no, these thoughts are for me. I don't know if I'm, that's the process. So sorry to interrupt there, but I'm so glad that you said that, because there's that. You also mentioned the point that it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be stream of consciousness. It can be whatever it is. And I think that maybe takes the pressure off people to make it feel like a chore. It needs to feel more like like you said, a moment for yourself, a conversation with your soul, versus something that has to be correct, or anything like that. And obviously it's been a healing process for you. It's been about self-discovery. So then we take that the next step and talk about your book. How has writing about your own experiences in your book, how has that made you feel, or what has that process been like?
Oh, it's been very healing, and it's like a legacy I'm leaving for my children. And I dedicated it to my late husband and the kids, because as hard as caregiving was, it was the most gratifying and loving thing I could have ever done. And I grew so much through it. And I wouldn't be the woman I am here today if I hadn't gone through that experience. It made me grow so much. Prior to my husband's illness, I was kind of like the quiet little mouse in the corner. I was very shy, introverted. I'm still introverted, but I learned that it's okay to have a voice and speak your truth, and to support others in that. And then writing the book, I wanted it to be a tool for caregivers for their whole journey, from the day they become a caregiver, when they're done their caregiving role, they're going through their grief journey and rebuilding their life. So I want this book to be a tool along that journey. And if journaling is all you do for the first however long, it's just the gift of journaling continues to help and support your growth and your vision of how you see yourself and the world around you. And then these worksheets, they sort of come in when you have more of the emotional energy and time to say, okay, who am I? Where do I go from here? Like, what can I do? And then it reintroduces you to your values, what kind of values you have, and what's important to you, and your inner purpose feeling. And so for my inner purpose feeling is when things are grounded and everything's going well and I feel grounded, my inner purpose feeling is calm. So these worksheets just kind of help reconnect you back to yourself, so you can help if you need more counseling, or you can take what you've learned to your counselor and say, okay, I'm doing this book, I'm feeling this way. And it kind of gives you a jump off point. And I wanted the book to be user friendly in the sense that you could do it on your own at home, or you could do it in a support group. Mm-hmm. And so really, that was the purpose for it. I just wanted to, that's the way I felt like I could reach out to caregivers and give them something that could support them in a time of a pandemic. And so that's really, and it gives me great joy and pride to know that 20 years ago, I sat on a lake with a box of books. And here I am 20 years later, and I wrote a book to support caregivers. So I feel like that's a pretty good full circle moment.
It sure is. It definitely is. It absolutely is. Well, let's talk about staying connected to yourself while caregiving, and during the healing journey after caregiving is finished. Because as you mentioned, for yourself specifically, you knew that your husband would
inevitably pass away. So sort of what's the difference between doing this while you're caregiving and then after the fact?
I think the biggest thing is that you have this foundational practice that is really set in with the journaling. So you're not really learning the journaling aspect of it. You've already got that foundation, and to go through the healing process, you need to reintroduce those foundational practices that are so important, like sleeping and eating properly and exercise and your emotions and spirituality, all those foundational practices that you can kind of reintroduce as your time is opened up because of you're not caregiving anymore. And you have to kind of get into that, as I did with the caregiver burnout. I had to realize that I had to start taking better care of myself so I could move through grief and rebuild a new life. And I totally understand that some people get caught in complicated grief and can't move through grief. And I'm quite aware of what that is like as well, that when you're kind of stuck in grief and you can't get through it. But at least the journaling gives again, it comes back to your voice. It gives you that voice, which gives you the strength to push through fear. And because really at that stage, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear. And oh my gosh, my life was around this relationship and that history. And here I am now, and I'm by myself, and I'm a single parent now, and I have to raise my children, and hopefully I do that okay, and I'm not going to make too many mistakes, and what's life going to look like? So it kind of gave me that foundation that I knew I could always go back to myself and trust what I was going to feel, because they were my emotions and my feelings. I wasn't looking outside of myself for someone to tell me what my emotions and feelings were. Only I could know that.
I love that idea of it being this foundation that you're building while you're in, in the experience of caregiving, which is coming at you fast and furiously, of course, and everything's new and it changes. It sort of feels like it's a sprint and a marathon at the same time, right? And then it sort of helps to carry you over to the other side when things are very different. And I know you said that it was a challenge finding support when you were especially new to your caregiving journey. What was the best piece of advice you received, though, when you began that whole experience of being a caregiver?
To be honest, I never received any advice.
Well, there you go.
I didn't experience any advice. It was like in the beginning, it was my husband's support system was in place. I wasn't part of the circle of care. I was to find my own support through a counselor or whatever. So I don't really remember anyone giving me any kind of advice. Yeah, I think for me, the advice that I would give caregivers right now is to realize that self-care is not selfish. That sentence is so important. And to not feel guilty if you have to make choices that may seem to others are selfish and not what they feel that you should be making, because you are living your reality. You are living your day-to-day, and only you know what decisions you make that will help on the journey. And so I went through a lot of guilt, breaking promises and making changes. And I'll just do a short story here about when my husband went to long-term care. that was the biggest promise I had to break, was because we were all in crisis, the kids and I. We were just exhausted. He went away for 2 weeks respite, and I couldn't bring him back home. My body shook. I physically couldn't do it anymore. And so he had to stay at the long-term care facility. But I still brought him home from Friday to Sunday, so we still had family time. But I had to make that decision, because if I hadn't, I was probably going to be in the hospital. I was probably going to be sick, because that's my body was just saying to, no, you can't do anymore. So what I thought was the most terrifying and terrible thing I had done, because I had broken the biggest promise, you can't die at home. You're not going to die at home. Mm-hmm. But in 18 months, we lived in the country. He didn't have a lot of interaction with other people, except for home care, who came in a couple of times a day. So the last 18 months, he had a new life. I knew there was brightness in people, and because he was around nurses and doctors and residents, and he became part of a community again. And then in the end, I felt like when he passed with 2 families. He had the family that he experienced the last 18 months with, and he had our family at home. So what really felt wrong in the beginning, and a lot of people might have had judgment around what I was doing, ended up for me was the best thing. I gave him a gift.
Yeah. And again, you said, and I think this was great insight, that you made those promises because you maybe didn't have all the information that you needed at that time. So had there been more resources for you, more support, which is what we're sort of trying to create here with the podcast, and certainly that you do with your work, perhaps you wouldn't really be going down that road, and you wouldn't have to feel that guilt, because no one should have to feel like they're superhuman. Right. That should definitely not be, and that's really an important thing that we're trying to share with everyone. So we're glad that you're here now to provide support for people and provide information. And on that note, we'd love to know where our listeners can find more about you and more about your book.
Well, I have a website, donnafitzgerald.ca. On the website, I've included some of my kind of little blog writings that I've written. You can order the book on the website. And then last year, I created a journal that goes with the workbook. And then I actually did a little video for each chapter. It's on the website. And it just kind of an introduction to the chapter. So if you're doing it at home, you have the book and you're doing it at home, you can go onto the website and look at the little video, which I did in my kitchen. So I'm doing all this, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm doing it. And that was the biggest thing I learned through caregiving. And my husband taught me to face fear. Don't let fear hold you back. Live life. So I have the website.
And what's the address for that?
donnafitzgerald.ca.
Great.
And then I have my email is creativehealing2019@outlook.com. And so it's been a journey, but I just hope that I can inspire others to realize that it's an amazing gift they're giving their loved one. And it's hard. The rewards are that you walk with your loved one to the end, and that you grow personally, and which that strength and courage takes you on through the rest of your life. And it actually teaches you to really be grateful. I'm grateful every day that I've been given another day, and you never know what tomorrow will bring. So it's a great thing.
Absolutely. Donna, thank you so much for being on the show today and for sharing your story. And of course, all the resources that you have created for all of our caregivers.
Oh, thank you. I did write something a little this morning I just wanted to close with.
Sure.
It's just called love. Love comes in many forms. Love can be sharp and cutting. Love can be joyful and full of hope. Love heals our heart. Love comes from within. You are love.
Thank you, Donna.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can access more details about support services on our website, ontariocaregiver.ca. Until next time, I'm Michelle Jobin, and you have been listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. We hope you have a wonderful day.